Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Single Women Retiring Abroad. You know, sometimes when you are thinking of moving abroad, you have so many choices. And I have always told you it's good to narrow it down. And once you make a choice, sometimes it's helpful to find out what's happening on the other side, somewhere else, especially in this day and age where we are considering a plan A, B, C. So today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing someone whom I have admired from afar and who is a trailblazer. And she is a dynamic creator, YouTuber, mom, and all kinds of other titles behind her name. So she's going to, introduce herself to kind of enlighten us here today about what some of the major differences might be between retiring in Panama versus retiring in Mexico. So, Miss Adalia, welcome to Single Women Retiring Abroad. We go SWA or schwa, and it's the same thing. This is my baby. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. So I am here to enlighten my subscribers about what some of the choices might be, the differences, similarities, you name it. So welcome again, and please take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to the viewers.
Thank you for having me. I feel very honored, particularly after that introduction. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Adalia Agora-Sade. This July will make 10 years since I left the US. I am originally from Houston, Texas. I have in the 10 years that I have been gone, I have lived in Honduras, Mexico, Kuwait, and China. Um, Maggie mentioned that I am a creator, and I don't know about all that, but I have been on the internet for I don't know how many years, sharing what my experience has been living abroad, as well as talking about one of my favorite topics, which is finances. I currently work, we're going to use quotation marks there, as a financial educator and coach, but really I am retired. I have lived in Mexico twice, initially back in 2017, and then I came back in 2020.
Wonderful. Now I heard Kuwait. No, I don't want to get into it, but boy, girl, you are so brave. Even as a nurse, sometimes they tell us, they're paying so much money, you can go work in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. I'm like, I don't know. But that's quite something to have on your resume, Adelia. Congratulations.
Well, I don't know because I'm probably persona non grata in Kuwait. But it was an experience. I learned some things from it, and we move on.
You moved on. That's wonderful. But as I said, Adelia, yes, we admire you. Yes, you are a creator because as long as you're creating content for us to watch you, you're a creator, right? So smart. Did you say you taught geography
I
in
did.
school?
I primarily taught geography, a little history. When I was in the States, I taught abroad for just a few years. And there I taught technology, drama, careers. I did
Wonderful.
a little of everything.
I love everything. You look back and you see all the things you've done, and you're like, did I do all that? Yes. But anyway, I think I'm always amazed when I meet women to see the breadth of careers, experiences, and knowledge. Even in this little group here, it's just amazing. Some women have done amazing things. But anyway, let's get back to the topic. You are in Mexico, I am in Panama. And we probably have different reasons as to why and how we landed there. So let me start with myself. I visited Panama in 2019, I believe. I was on a tour, and this feeling of belonging and peace came over me. And I was like, I like this place. So 2, 3 years down the line, when I decided to retire and things didn't work out some other places, I said, let me check back. And when I came back, the feeling was still strong that this is a place that I feel good, right? Because to me, that's important. So tell us your story. How did you land in Mexico? You said it's your second time.
Yes. When I left the US, I initially moved to Honduras. I expected to be there 2 years because I had a contract, and I was very open to where I would end up. I did know I wanted to be in Latin America because despite learning French and Latin in school, and that was a choice. French was a choice, Latin was not. The more I started contemplating this move, I was like, you know what? I'd really like to learn Spanish. So that meant I needed to be in Latin America. Being in Houston, there was a job fair specifically for international schools in Latin America. So I went, um, and I interviewed with the school I ended up with in Honduras and several in different parts of Mexico. And my personal feelings, Mexico was a place I could take or leave. I had been to Cancun, I had been to Cozumel on a cruise, the one and only cruise I've ever been on in my life. And I had been to a border town right on the other side of Brownsville. I can't remember the name. Oh, so I remember saying to myself, well, Mexico, if it's not like, because I don't like the beach. So I know a lot of people, when they think about Mexico, they think about the beach.
Right.
And I was over that part, didn't want to see that. So I was like, if it's not something more interesting like Mexico City, I'm not interested. And I actually did have a school from Mexico City who was interested, but they were just starting. And small people are not my specialty. And so we both were like, okay, maybe when y'all add some more grades, it'll make more sense for me to
Right.
come back. And I ended up going to Honduras. However, that school had a enrollment drop, and so they had to restructure a lot of things, which meant I would go from doing my job as the director of like technology integration, that I would do that, I would
Oh,
continue to do that, but I would also teach all of high school social studies. And part of me going abroad was to have a better work life balance. So I told them, no, thank you. And because of when it was in the year, like hiring season was kind of over. I wasn't really enthusiastic about it. I had been working since I was 15 years old. And because I had somehow started following this lady named Vicarious on Instagram,
yes.
Stephanie Perry, y'all might have
Oh,
heard of her. She was on a grown up gap year. And I thought, well, I don't want to go back to the state. I don't want to look for a job. Maybe I'll just do that. And I ended up taking my grown up gap year in Mexico City in 2017. And I didn't know much about Mexico City. I did like some comparisons um, using online tool, the Earth Awaits, because
oh.
I knew what I wanted from a place. I just didn't know where that place was.
Mhm.
And I got it narrowed down between Medellin, Colombia, and Mexico City. I ended up coming to Mexico City. And as soon as I got here, I was like, oh, this is great. This is
You
perfect.
felt that connection.
I did. And when I was only on my gap year for a year because my youngest was going to need to go to college and somebody was going to have to pay for it. So I went back to work, which is how I ended up in Kuwait. But I always knew I would end up coming back. And it took me a little while. And I came
But
back
that
in
gap year kind
2020.
of cemented that for you. That's good.
Oh,
That's good.
yes.
All right, so you're in the city and I'm in the city. I never thought I would be a city person, because I've always lived in the suburbs. But here I am. I made 3 scouting trips to Panama to be sure I wanted to be here. And then on one of those years, I took 3 weeks and traveled all around the country. I stayed a couple of days here, a couple of days there. And then I did the town, I mean, the rounds. And when I came back, I said, I'm staying right here in the city. For whatever reason, convenience, so much to do, the ease of transport. I didn't want to have a car. And so the city worked for me. So I know you love Mexico City. Tell me the few things, the things that you like the most about being in the city. And I look at the temperature today. Okay, I don't even want to talk about it. It's 87 here. It's 63 over there. What's wrong with us?
That is one of my most favorite things in the
63.
world
Okay.
about Mexico City. When
Mm-hmm.
I first came here, because again, grew up in Houston, and it was August, and I had to put on a hoodie to go walk the dog. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Sign
this
me
is
up.
great. So the weather got me from the beginning. Um, the city is roughly the same size as Houston. There are just a lot more
Big.
people.
Yes.
But one of the things that I appreciate here is mass transit because I knew that wherever I was going to end up, I did not want to own a car. And so I can live my life here between transit options. There's bus, there's trains. Well, there's the subway, there is the light rail, there is a trolley bus. We even have the cablebus, the
The
like
overhead.
gondolas. Yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
even have those.
They have a
So
name for it.
that's another favorite of mine. And then I like I like museums. I like history. This city
Yeah.
is 700 years old, and it's always, every time you look it up, between Mexico City and London, there's kind of a debate about who has the
Nice.
most museums.
Museums.
So for me, those are some of my favorite things about this city.
And you feel good being there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I People always talk about how like welcoming and kind Mexicans are, and that very much has been my experience. Even when my Spanish was lacking, folks were still like, we're going to help you. We're going to help you figure it out. And I can tell you, living in other countries, other culture, not all other cultures are the same way.
Mhm. Well, fortunately for us, I think everything you've said, well, we don't have the what do they call those? Ferry, whatever, transport. I think they're
Mm-hmm.
thinking of bringing one in one of our little towns. But I have to say that we probably have the same things minus the temperature. That one we don't have, unfortunately. But the people are also very kind. All right, so if somebody is considering, because this is the big decision, moving abroad, retiring abroad, and I want you to know I appreciate it when you interviewed me and you asked me that question that has started my mind going in a direction. You had asked me, I don't know if you remember that. You said, did you move to Panama to retire or did you move to age in place? Even though it's in the realm of what I'm thinking, but I don't think I ever verbalized it like that. So thank you for that, because then it was like focusing on the aging abroad. So if somebody is wanting to move abroad, minus all the stuff that's going on at home right now and the pressures and the anxiety and the desire to make a quick exit, which we all have told our people is like, take a step back, hold up, make sure you do that work and you make sure you get your stuff in order. So if somebody was considering moving abroad, I could tell them cost of living is a little cheaper, even though a lot of people are finding that Panama is not that cheap, especially in the city. In the interior, probably. Um, yes, the people are nice. And a lot of people would tell you they would get to the airport and then they have that sense of it's like a release. Someone said it's something to do with the equator and us being close. I don't know. But you do feel peaceful and relaxed when you're here. Lots of fruits, fresh fruit, vegetable available. You get a sense that you're doing something good for your body when you eat here. The people are friendly and helpful. political stability. Nobody's is looking at you and trying to hurt you. And what is also attractive to people coming to Panama, we tell them, is that when they land at the airport, they see a lot of people who look like them because Panama is very multi-ethnic and the 70% of the population is mixed. So we have that going for us. So what do you think about Mexico that would be attractive to an older person when they're considering retirement?
Because Mexico is such a large country, there's a little bit for everyone. Like
Okay.
I said, I personally do not enjoy the beach. So I live in a city that is like 7,400 feet above sea level, but is ringed by mountains. But you know, there are the beaches, there are the mountains, there's the desert, there's a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
And so I think Mexico can offer a lot. Now, if we're talking about Mexico City, I don't know.
Mhm.
There are, you know, like there are older people everywhere,
Right.
but Mexico City can be a little challenging, I think, primarily, primarily from a mobility standpoint. And if I'm honest, this is probably true of all of Mexico. But I will amend that and say whatever the experience is that you want. If you want high-rise living, you want a house with a garden, you can have that in this city, but it will be a very specific part of the city. So, because one of the complaints a lot of people make here about this place is that it is noisy, and it is. So if you're saying, oh no, I don't want to live in a apartment building where I have neighbors on all sides, I want to be in a house. Okay, you can do that. It is going to be more expensive. It is not going to be as convenient to the mass transit, but you could have all of those experiences. But in this city in particular, sidewalks are not, they're not friendly to anybody,
Same
even
here.
able-bodied folks.
Yeah.
They are not. And, you know, like the building, most people live in uh,
High rises.
multi-floor housing just because land is at a premium. But there doesn't seem to have been a lot of thought. I think we're a little spoiled coming from the US with
Yes.
ADA regulations.
Mhm.
Um, I have walked across this city because during the pandemic, during lockdown, we didn't have anything else to do. So we walked for hours. I think I have only seen maybe two apartment buildings that you did not have to go up or down a flight of stairs to enter the building.
Mm.
And so
So
I
definitely
think
that's a
about that.
concern, something to consider.
Yeah, like the last building I lived in, there was a family, I think it was the grandmother. She was in a wheelchair. Um, and so she would have to go down the elevator into the garage and then get in the car from there. She couldn't come, you know, she couldn't take the stairs. She couldn't come into the lobby where
Lobby.
security is because that's all stairs. So I think about that sometimes is
Mhm.
how are people managing who have mobility issues? Because the city is not great
Right.
when it comes to that. And this country is not great.
Well, that's good to know because we have the same issue with the sidewalks here. And you mentioned pockets of where they can find houses. Same thing here, but it will be like in an area that is not expat heavy, and the architecture and the layout of the homes are different from what they're used to. So definitely it's good to know. And of course, in Panama, a lot of people, some people tell them you can live here on $1,000 a month. I said, I'm never going to tell you that. Whoever is telling you that, go follow them because I don't know that because I'm in the city. But you certainly can find cheaper housing in the interior, but then you have the issue with transportation and such. Okay, that's good to know. All right, now when you walk around, and as you said, Mexico is so big. I've heard places like Guanajuato, and in fact, there is a sister here. who was in Mexico getting her residency, and she's here in Panama right now visiting. And she loved Guanajuato, and I've seen other, other places. So do you have pockets of expats in different areas of Mexico, and maybe what the demographics are like in those pockets?
Yeah, that is exactly it. Like Mexico City has a sizable number of Black American foreigners, but also Black folks from the diaspora. Because folks will come and visit and be like, "Oh, I gave these people the nod and they didn't nod back," and I'm like, they could have been Cuban, they could have been, from a bunch of different places,
That's right.
but like the population is large enough here that was it, I guess it was last week, Kev on Stage came and did a performance.
Okay.
In Mexico City, I think there is a range. I don't think it is very young. I think the young people tend to like the beach locations better. And when I say young, I'm talking about early 20s.
Okay.
They are in Playa del Carmen, they are in Puerto Escondido, those kinds of places. Mexico City, I think it's a lot of people from, you know, early 30s on up.
Probably
Um,
working. Maybe these
Say
are
that again.
nomads. Maybe they're working.
Some of them tend to
Yeah.
be, I'm trying to think. Because we don't ever talk about work. That's one thing that's very different from the US. People meet you and they
What
want
do
to know
you
what you
do?
do.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what we do here. So, some people are working remote. We get a few nomads, but there is a sizable population that this is where they live.
Okay.
The nomads tend to be, again, in the beach locations.
Just okay.
There is, everybody knows San Miguel de Allende,
Mhm.
which is, this very picturesque town I believe it is in the state of Guanajuato.
Okay.
That's a little older.
Right. But
Um,
is it pretty
and it is
demographics mixed, or is it mostly Caucasian, or they mixed?
the number of Black foreigners is increasing. I
Okay.
think for a long time, it was a place that was primarily white,
Mhm.
as was Ajijic and
Right.
what is the other place? Lake Chapala.
Victor Paula. Yeah.
But I would say in the last couple of years, there has really been some growth in San Miguel de Allende. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Michelle Wedderburn. She
Yeah.
runs is it a bed and
Relocation
breakfast, a
company.
guest house?
And she's got, yeah, you got
Um,
it like an Airbnb kind of place.
yeah, she's got a guest house and she's actually opened a like co-living space
Hmm.
aimed at people that are like 50 plus.
Right. I think I call it a hacienda something.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
But there aren't, if you're like in your 20s and 30s, I don't think San Miguel is where you're gonna find
Right.
your people.
Right.
But it skews a little older. Guadalajara seems to have a growing population as well.
Hmm.
And then also Puerto Vallarta, which is also in the state of Jalisco with Guadalajara.
Hmm.
Um, on the whole, I think Mexico City, Querétaro, and San Miguel de Allende, as well as Lake Chapala, has a more like a wider age
Age
range,
range.
but definitely skews a little older. Mexico City, I think we're starting to get more folks that are like late 60s, early 70s that want to move here.
Hmm.
But primarily that is not the group right now.
Okay. Well, here in Panama, it was mostly the elderly who moved here to retire. In fact, I was reading about a young person who decided to leave Panama City and said, I find that it's like a retirement hub. And it's been Panama. I mean, the whole pensionado visa was geared toward attracting people my age. But on the reverse, we're seeing an expansion in the demographics now with the what Stephanie Perry calls the migration, right? We're finding a lot more couples, younger people with kids moving into Panama. You know, we can see them at the mall and the street. So the demographics changing also. But because my demographics is a single older woman, so we're going to stick to that. Do you have any understanding of what it would take someone to get a retirement visa in Panama? Someone my age, 65 plus?
Yes. Mexico is one of the few countries that I've dealt with that is very straightforward about getting residency. You do it primarily through if you're not married to somebody or giving birth to somebody, it is it is through financial solvency. So basically, Mexico has a formula. They take the minimum wage, and you have to have an income of like 3,000 time that or 5,000 time that, depending if you want temporary or permanent.
Okay.
Now, that's the basics
General.
of the rule.
Okay.
That's the basics of the rule. But nothing is ever that simple in Mexico. Because you say, oh, there's a formula. So that means when I go to the consulate in the States, all the consulates should require the same income. No, they don't.
I've heard
And
that.
that doesn't make sense because it's a mathematical formula that they should all be using, and it doesn't. But generally speaking, because it has gone up in the last 8 years because they have raised minimum wage substantially. And so back in 2017, you might have needed $1,200 of monthly income. That's now over $4,000.
Because the minimum wage has increased.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you're going by income and you want temporary. Permanent, if you want them to just give you permanent off the bat, it's higher than that. I think I've heard it's as much as like 7,000. But you can also do it by savings.
Oh.
So and they count 401ks, IRAs, all that
Rental
kind of stuff.
income,
If
yeah, all
you,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
they want to see 12 months of you having in your savings about $70,000.
Mhm.
For temporary, I think it's closer to like 100,000 for permanent.
So they don't have a specific retirement visa like Panama does. Okay.
No.
So it's
Um,
whatever category you fall into, then okay. So is that the reason why you would want to work with like a facilitator to kind of help you see if you meet the requirement, or can you do it on your own?
you can do it on your own, but
There's a
Mexico
but
is Mexico. Um, there was something I was just gonna say to you about that.
the visa, the income.
Oh, what was it? Okay, so um, you asked about they don't have a real retirement visa.
Right.
Technically, no, but in practice, permanent residency is kind of seen as a retirement visa.
Hmm.
So I'll use myself. I was 42 when I was living in China. I knew I wasn't going to stay there. So on summer vacation, I spent it in Mexico, and I said, well, since I'm doing that, let me go ahead and apply for residency and knock that out while I'm there. And I had the money to qualify for permanent. There is nothing in the rules, in the law, that says there is an age limit. It is supposed to be simply you have the money, you get it.
Income. Hmm.
I went and they were like, you have to have a pension. Because I taught in Texas public schools and I rolled that into my own investment, I'm never going to have a pension. I never paid into Social Security. So according to this lady's interpretation, I was never going to qualify. And so I told her, thank you. And I took my paperwork back and I had a backup appointment at another consulate. And before I drove 5 hours to New Orleans, I emailed them and I was like, hey, does it matter how old I am? And they said, no. Do you have the money? So I went to my appointment in New Orleans. So I say that to say, although technically permanent residency isn't supposed to be a retirement visa, they do treat it that way. And so often what most people will just do is get temporary. You have that for 4 years and then you can convert it to permanent.
Okay, so temporary is 4 years. So if you went into Mexico with a US passport, do you still get 180 days like they do here?
You can get up to that. There are some tricks you can do to kind of guarantee that you do. If you have the option of going to a machine or a person, a machine is more likely to give you 180 days, no issue.
Okay. Okay. All right, guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, remember to like, share, subscribe. Like Stephanie Perry said, I'll wait.
Always.
Get a drink. Thank you, Adalia. So people really need to understand. That's what I said. When I usually say you need to know the rules of the country before you decide to embark and, spend that much money and see if it's going to work for you. This friend of mine who just did it, she worked with a facilitator. I want to say she went last year and got something, and then she just returned and got her permanent. I didn't ask for the details, so it is possible. Let's talk about cost of living because that's one of the things. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead because this what I had remembered I want to say fits perfectly with
Right,
this.
cost of living, because a lot of time, barring political situation, a sense of not being safe, but mainly the cost of living is one of the main reasons why people even consider moving abroad. Because you and I know, I'm in healthcare. If you have a home, whatever social security, if that's all you have, you can't make ends meet. We know that. People end up bagging groceries just to buy medications and stuff. So people are really looking for a place where their dollar is going to stretch. Now, what I tell people based on my experience, I say to come to Panama and live comfortably. And comfortably is very relative, right? What's comfortable for me may not be for you. But if you want to stay in the city and you want to live a semi-comfortable life, I don't drive, I don't eat out, so I live very simply. I think you need about $2,000 to $2,400, which is what I tell people a month. And then, of course, somebody's going to be in the comments saying, well, less than that. Why are you telling them that? I said, yes, ma'am, I understand that. But because of Mexico being so vast and having so many pockets, what would you say the average, and I hate to use that word because it depends on the person, right?
Yes, and we have the opposite, the situation that Panama has.
Okay,
Panama says you only need $1,000 of income and
right.
you can live here,
Mhm.
but it costs,
It's
it's going to
not
cost
what
you
you need
more
to
than
live
that.
on, right?
And Mexico is saying you need to have $4,000 plus a month, and it will cost you significantly less than that. Um,
Ah,
so it's very interesting because people are
very.
like because
You don't
the
really
average
need 4,000
Mexican,
a month to live, but that's what we ask.
yes, the average Mexican makes like $500-600 a month, maybe a good job is like $1,100 a month. That's a good job. So somebody coming, I will tell you this: Mexico City, most expensive part of the country. Um, just going even to some place like Guadalajara, you could almost cut, at least this used to be the case, rent was almost half as much, or you would get so much more for the rent you were paying. But in this city, as a foreigner, $2,500, $2,000. The bulk of that is going to be rent.
Rent.
Unless you want to eat at like the best restaurants, eating out is not going to cost you that much. Entertainment is not going to cost you that much. So and you can have a lifestyle. I have a friend who was a corp here because her job and their apartment costs like $10,000 a month, but her
Ooh.
employer was paying for that.
Ah, okay.
So you can have any kind of lifestyle here, but the like typical lifestyle that a foreigner is going to want to have, I think $2,000
2000 would
is
work.
plenty. And you can absolutely go to smaller places
And live
and
on
it will
less.
be, yes, it will cost less, but there will be fewer foreigners.
Right.
And
And the
so,
language and all that, transportation.
yes, all of that sort of thing.
So what would you say, I'm a city person, let's say, and I know in your city it's so big, you have different pockets. What would be the average? I can tell you the average rental here for like most people live in a two-bedroom would be between 1,000 up to 2,400 a month. What would you think Mexico would it be about the same?
That varies because the very hip neighborhoods, the ones that everybody is told to go to, rents there. I've seen, and this was appalling to me. And when I mentioned it to somebody Mexican, they about fell out of their chair. Um, this was a 1 bedroom apartment. It was furnished and they wanted like 52,000 pesos.
Which
That's like
is
$2,700,
a
I
month.
believe. Yes. Mind you, I lived in a 2 bedroom, 2 bath, not furnished, had a little balcony, and my apartment was 13,000 pesos, which was like $600 or so. So there is a massive range. Being in the trendy neighborhoods, you are going to pay
Mhm.
US prices.
Yes. All right.
Um,
Well, here we
but
don't call it trendy, but popular, right?
yes,
And you don't really have to live in the popular spots. But for safety, they kind of like to stay in the certain areas. So in the area, for example, where the rent was about 600, 700, you still had access to the metro and all the amenities. Okay,
yes.
good. All right, we talked
But
about,
it takes work to find that.
oh,
And I think that is something people would need to be prepared for. Um, Particularly people coming from the US. And when they think, oh, I'm going to get an apartment, I'm going to go to the building, there'll be a rental office, and they can tell me, like, oh, they'll have this unit available at the end of this month. That is not that kind of setup is very rare here. Most apartments are owned individually. People's first instinct is, okay, let me get an agent. Well, we don't have the MLS. The vast majority of properties are never listed online. So the agent can show you the stuff that they have,
hmm, with
or you
a
have,
spot of other availabilities.
yes.
Hmm.
And so you have to walk around and look for rent signs. You've got to do like a multi-pronged attack. So it does take some time to find, if price is important,
Right.
it is going to take some work to find a place that is in a neighborhood you're comfortable with, but also at your price point.
Well, are there people like here, they have people who would take you around and help you find an apartment? Do they have those folks over there?
Not really, not in Mexico City.
City.
You will find that in places that are where snowbirds are a lot.
Mhm.
You'll get like Puerto
I've
Vallarta,
seen some
Playa del
people and
Carmen.
he doing that. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So
In
you
the city,
physically has to,
not
you have
really.
to kind of see the sign, call. And then if you don't speak it Spanish, oh, there we go.
Oh yeah. It's a friend of mine has just found an apartment, just moved, and watching her go through that. I've been through it twice at least. No, three times I've been through it. And I've been in this apartment for 2 years, and I was like, I'm never moving again because it is a
It's
struggle. So that
hard.
is something to know, particularly like Mexico City. There are easier places in other parts of Mexico, but Mexico City, it takes some work.
So there's no one really willing to take that on to assist, let's say, an expat in finding a place. That's a business idea for someone.
It is, but I'm not interested in it. I mean, I've seen people I've seen people
Adalia
post,
said, just
like
before you get
that's
any
what they're looking
ideas.
for. Yeah, not for me. And some agents will do that, but
Okay.
because agents don't share commissions here, that's a very new concept. So people are very hesitant to put in some work
There's no
if they don't know how
motivation.
they're going to get
Yes.
paid.
So I guess maybe then you have to pay them anyway.
Yes,
All right.
that's what I would say. You would have to,
You
you
have
need
to
to think
pay
you
to
have to
make
do
them an incentive to find your
that.
apartment.
Mhm.
Okay, well, that's an idea again for somebody. Not Adelia, don't call Adelia.
No, not for
Yeah.
me.
So I know about the food over there is fresh and cheap and everybody can eat. So I have a friend also who's staying there temporarily. She's in Merida because she has a condition where she needs warm weather. And she probably watching that. Hola, Greta. Um, Food is not an issue. What about electric? Is it high in the city?
No, but that's because we don't have air conditioning.
That is right. You're in the mountain. I don't want to talk to you about that. Let's keep on moving.
Now climate change is making that a little bit more difficult than it used to be, but we don't have heat, we don't have air conditioning, and electricity is subsidized by the government.
Oh,
So as long as
that's
you don't
good.
go above a certain
Yeah,
threshold, your
yeah,
bill
you're
will be
good.
affordable.
So about what, $50 a month, 100, depending on consumption?
$5.
Five what? All right, we're moving. It's a bit more
Now,
expensive
again,
here in
I would
Panama
imagine
City.
if you're in Cancun, Playa del Carmen, it is going to be more expensive than that.
Right.
But here in Mexico City, you get a light bill, an electricity bill by every 2 months. And generally, it's about $10, $12.
Wow, that is amazing. You know, cheaper food, you could pay the money to to get the apartment. Okay. What about healthcare? I'm watching the time. What about healthcare? How easy is it and affordable is it to get insurance or to go see a doctor?
To go see a doctor, it's very, very easy. A lot of the big chain pharmacies have consultorios next door. So you can go see a doctor for anywhere between $3 to like $8 to
Wow.
see a doctor.
If you have
Now, if
like the sniffle or something simple.
yeah,
Okay.
something like that. If you want to go to like private practice, what have you, that's probably going to be closer to like $50 to $75. And that includes specialists. Like you want to go to an endocrinologist just because you want to go. You
Right.
don't need to have any
A
kind of
referral,
referral or anything. Um, Insurance, if you're on the public system,
which you can be
like
as an
you
expat.
can be if you have residency, you can be. And that was originally my plan. And then the system collapsed during COVID. And I was like, oh, we need to rethink this plan. Um, so if you get on the system, which you still can, and different how good it is depends on where you live. But we're talking about $500 a year. But private, if you are going to the doctor, because most insurance. Now, if you have like a global insurance like Cigna or something like
Vietnam.
that,
Mhm,
they'll reimburse you. But if you're just getting like the regular kind of health insurance everybody else gets, it tends to be catastrophic coverage.
mhm.
So
But it is
going
available
to,
if somebody wanted to purchase.
yes,
Okay.
yes, it is available. I have had a Mexican company. I think the company I have now is not, but um, you know, I talked to a broker, gave her my information. I had choices. Do I want to pay uh, one lump sum? Do I want
Deductible
to pay quarterly? Do I want to pay monthly? And we're talking about for a year. I'm about to be 51. And so mine jumped big for this company I'm with now. We're talking about like $2,500.
a year.
And then, you'll have a deductible, but most medical care um, is fairly affordable that you can pay out of pocket. Like I'm looking at my phone now because I just saw there's a deal because it's Women's History Month or Women's Month.
Yes.
I need a mammogram and a ultrasound, and somebody's running a deal for like $45.
Yeah, we have those here as well. I think for us, somebody your age would be able to find a good plan here. It's just once we hit 65, Panama just kind of shuts the door, and it's like you have pre-existing condition. Who doesn't at 65? And it becomes really, really difficult for older folks in Panama. So that's why. What about going into a hospital? Are they kind of affordable? Do you have public and private?
There is public and private. I can tell you in a private hospital, you need to be prepared to pay uh, as you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Friend of a friend tore their Achilles and needed surgery, was in the hospital for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 days. The surgery, everything came to about $8,000
In a private hospital.
in a private hospital.
Okay.
Um, so, most folks don't have $8,000 laying
Right.
around, which
Right.
is where the insurance would come into play.
Mhm.
We do have the same issues about um, pre-existing conditions,
Right.
as well as like with the company that I'm with. Um, they said they will cover me until I'm about 74, 75.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's why even younger people coming here, your age, I said, go ahead and get locked into a plan because they will cover you. But if you're coming in your 70s, it's tight. And if you even consider an international plan, I mean, they're quoting people 1,500 a month. Not that many people have that money. And the joke here is when you go into the private hospital, you have to have a tarjeta. Tarjeta.
Mm-hmm.
You need an IV, tarjeta. You need an ultrasound, tarjeta.
Yes,
That's the way
same
it works if
here.
you don't have a catastrophic plan. Yes. All right, so that's similar a little bit in that area. Okay, the last thing I want, oh, how about crime? Is it like it's anywhere but nothing particular
I,
to
I
Mexico?
think in the big city, like here, it's the same as if you were in New York or you were in Chicago or you were in LA. Most of the crime that I hear about tends to be somebody got their phone stolen
Petty
on the
crime.
metro, that you weren't paying attention at a cafe and they walked by and took your bag, that kind of
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Violent crime, particularly involving foreigners,
Mhm.
um, it's not really. It is.
Other
It is
thing.
rare. I'm not going to act like it doesn't happen,
Right,
but it is
right.
very rare.
Okay, good. Last question. They want to make sure I ask you about co-living. Are you in a co-living situation? I wasn't sure.
I am.
Okay.
I am. I have been for 2 years and three
Wow, been
months.
that long. And of course, it's going well.
Great. It really is. Um, and I say that kind of surprised because I didn't necessarily go into it thinking it would be, but it it has been. And if we're, talking about being in some place and aging in a place,
Mm-hmm.
it gives me a certain amount of confidence that, somebody will be there, somebody is around, and I do the same
Gonna check on
for
you, say,
her.
hey, are you okay? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, this has been a really good decision for me.
That's wonderful. Maybe we can do another video about that because here it's in its infancy, right? And people love Panama, but a lot of people cannot afford to rent like a high rise, 15, $1,800 on their own. So if you were there, we have a co-living couple situation in my building, and they knew each other before they came to Panama. And there was another co-living, they were friends before. So we're just trying to figure out how does it work with people who don't necessarily have a relationship prior to deciding to, did you know your partner co-liver before?
We met in Mexico, but we
Okay.
were friends and business partners before we moved in together. But there's a woman I've met here who she is 69, 70, about that age when she moved to Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And she is co-living with two young Mexicans. And I think it is the greatest thing ever. Like,
Wow. I wouldn't have
I
thought
think that
about
is so
that.
cool.
That is
I, I think
wonderful.
I think in our community as a whole, we are just starting to like kind of rethink some of
Same
our
here.
ideas
Mm-hmm.
about how we're supposed to live. And so I hope particularly for women, I really want to see more of us,
Yes.
banding together and living together. Because I
Well, I
think I
can
think it's an
tell you
overall positive.
that there is high interest in it. And definitely, I want to do more research on it. I know I reached out to, there's a woman who said she was doing that in Texas somewhere, and I reached out, I didn't hear anything. So my thing with SWRA is that if it's not there, we can find, let's create it, right? Because it's about us aging. So now people here in Panama are starting to think about it, but doing it with two locals, that even, you're just blowing my mind. Every time I talk to you, you give me ideas, right? Adalia, because think about it. And I want to finish soon because we're getting close to an hour. One Panamanian made the comment one time. She said, no, I know a lot of you love Panama and you want to retire in Panama. She said, she lives stateside. She said, I have my parents in Panama, but I have family that I trust to take care of her. And she said, she looked at us, she said, you will eventually have to return home because there's nobody going to take care of you in your country, in your adoptive country. So what we need to do is to create something where not, we don't have to be, taking ourselves out because there's no one to take care of us. But the idea of being with, oh, wow, that is novel and it's a good
I
idea.
mean, my current roommate, housemate, whatever you want to call her, she previous when she first moved here, she rented a room living with two other Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was open to that idea. She had ended up getting her own place, and then I showed up and was like, "Hey, what if we?"
Let's look at this.
Um,
Good.
yeah, but I'm hoping more people can see the value in it.
And it's not
Um,
just the financial gains, is what you said, the companionship and the idea that there's somebody can look, ask about you, make sure you're okay. And okay, yeah, I want to explore that some more. Hopefully you'll be open to talking some more about it because we're going to
of course.
have to. We don't have a choice as we get older, especially if we want to stretch our monies and be able to afford healthcare and at the same time have friendships and I like it. Is there anything else you think I should have mentioned? This goes into the thing about long-term care, looking long range, because I'm
Mhm.
67 and if I take care of myself, I could live to be 80, 90. That's quite a few years that I have to plan for. Um, Therefore, we need to be open. to different ways of living that we didn't think about before. So, is there anything you think
Absolutely.
someone, because I can tell you, you're going to be getting some calls. And when I do relocation calls, it's more about what I know about Panama, right? I can't tell you anything that I don't know. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. But people sometimes are curious, and if they want to make the decision, they just need kind of confirmation or support that they're going the right direction. Not that, yeah, go over here. I ever do that. I'm like, look at your situation and make a decision. So, is there anything you think we should have mentioned about anyone older who might be looking at Mexico?
Well, I was thinking when you asked me about crime,
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice in my response, I did not default and say, oh, but the cartel. Given, what happened the other month,
Mm-hmm.
some people may wonder like how pressing of a concern that is. And I don't, it is not my intention to downplay that and the violence, but um, in the places that most people who would be moving to Mexico are going to choose, um, dealing with violence of that nature is not something that they're doing on a daily
Right.
basis.
Right.
Like I always say, I don't have cartel business, so they ain't worried
They're
about
not
me.
looking for me.
No,
Yeah. And you know what? And I didn't address it either. I didn't ask you about it because there's violence everywhere. And it comes in all kinds of forms, as we know. So we are the least people to be talking, pointing the finger at anybody,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So I hope you guys enjoy this talk. Adelia was very genuine and in sharing her information. This is her life, her story. When you talk to me, I tell you about my life. I'm not out there looking and going into people's businesses. I live very simply, and my life is full. I like my life. So I'm still, after 3 years, very happy to be here in Panama. And we know Adelia is happy with your 63-degree weather. I'm not going to let that slide because it's just not fair. Just not fair. Look at her. She's nice and
I
cool.
I I'm telling you that like that sold me above anything else. Um, and when it does get warm here, which it is about to, because April and May are the warmest months of the year, I, of course, am belly aching about how hot it is, and it is all of 85.
I know, right? Like it's 100.
But yes, this suits me very, very well.
Good, good. And as I always say, people, go where you feel the best, period. Right? So, Adelia, thank you so much for talking to us and sharing your experience and helping people in their decision-making process, because that's what it takes. Getting information, being educated, and making an educated decision. And that's what this video was about. So thank you, Adelia. Hopefully
Thank
I'll
you
reach
for
out
having
again, and
me.
I know you're going to say yes when we talk about
Of course.
cultivating, because we need to do something for us, single women, and how we're going to move on in this world. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And I will say goodbye, Adelia. Hasta
Bye.
luego. Muchas gracias.
Nada.